Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mind Game channel. You might have noticed we are back at the Herta space station now that the Amphoreus arc concluded with the story of Cyrene. However, Remembrance isn't quite finished with us yet. Version 3.8 brought us back to Penacony to uncover distorted memories, finally providing closure to the 2.x storyline. I've previously posted 2 videos on this channel analyzing Adventuring, Acheron, and Sunday, but Firefly was noticeably missing. In my defense, the writers didn't quite finish her story, so how could I make an analysis about her? It felt like the writers were holding back the full picture of Firefly's story. Perhaps they feared the bittersweet ending would cause major backlash from the player base, so they used the entire Amphoreus arc to lay the groundwork. But now the final piece of the Firefly puzzle is in place. After the intro, we are heading back to Penacony. Spoiler warning, this video contains major spoilers for the entire 2.x and 3.x stories. Yes, you heard me right, it will even touch on the Amphoreus plot because the new 3.8 content relies on key concepts introduced there. So, to those who used Finality's vision to skip straight to 3.8, I'm sorry but you're gonna have to go back and finish Amphoreus. But I promise it's worth it. And if you feel confused and lost about the story, you can always check my videos on Evernight and Cyrene. Or not, it's not like there's gonna be an exam. Or is there? In my analysis of Adventuring and Acheron, we discussed how they represent the philosophies of Nietzsche and Simone de Beauvoir, respectively. The 2.1 story essentially staged a dialogue between these two titans of existentialism. Firefly, however, represents another pillar of this movement, Martin Heidegger. Heidegger doesn't have the best reputation. For one, his work is notoriously impenetrable. He loved philosophical jargons. He frequently gave common words entirely new meanings. He relied heavily on German terms that are essentially untranslatable to English. And if translation to English, a fellow Germanic language, proves to be difficult, you can only imagine the impossibility of translating his work into a more distant language. But of course, being difficult doesn't necessarily ruin a reputation. Hegel and Kant aren't exactly light reading either. The real issue is that Heidegger was a Nazi. I'm not throwing insult, this is a historical fact. I have no proof, but I suspect the English localization team deliberately softened the link between Firefly and Heidegger because they were worried people might not pull for her if they went online and found her directly quoting a Nazi. In the animated short, The Embirth of Glamoth, she awakens her powers, and this is what she said.
My fireflies into a flame. Life begets death.
The original Chinese for the second half of that sentence is 向死而生. This isn't a common Chinese phrase, it's used exclusively in one context only, as the standard translation for Heidegger's concept of being towards death. If I were the localizer, I would have used something like fireflies to a flame, we live towards death. But that's neither here nor there. Besides, if the lack of an overt connection helped players experience the character without preloaded prejudice, I'd call it an overall win. But since you are here for a philosophical analysis, I assume you are willing to set aside those judgments for 30 minutes and investigate the merits of the ideas themselves. To understand Heidegger, the first thing you need to do is learn German. Just kidding. Though it would help. Well, I don't speak German, so please forgive my likely atrocious pronunciations that are coming in this video. The actual first step is not any easier. We must understand human existence, which Heidegger calls Dasein. Why didn't he just use the term human existence? Well, because Western philosophical tradition has historically examined human existence through a subject-object dichotomy. By the time you say the words human existence out loud, your mind is already filled with biases. Plato argued that our world is a poor imitation of a world of perfect forms, where general concepts reside. For example, there is a concept of tree there is a concept of book, and the specific instances of those trees and books we see in our world are mere projections cast by those eternal, and not to mention external, concepts. We might study a specific tree, but only as a means to reach the universal form of tree. This gave birth to the scientific method, which worked wonders for our understanding of the physical world. However, Heidegger pointed out a problem, that we tend to apply the same logic to human existence. We act as if there is a human existence that is independent of all actual humans, like a spherical chicken in a vacuum that is just floating out there, which we can observe objectively. Heidegger says this is impossible. Not only because the tools I use to observe human existence, such as language, logic, etc., were given to me by human existence, but because when you simplify human existence into an external objective thing, you strip away some of its vital components. You end up like a blind man trying to know what an elephant is by touching its different parts. You never manage to understand it entirely. For Heidegger, Dasein isn't a thing, it's a field. It is the space in which everything that exists is allowed to happen and be encountered. Imagine an empty field with a football sitting on it. Does football cause confusion? Soccer? Okay, I'll employ some visual aid, but it's not like the specific type of sport makes a difference here. Traditional philosophy looks at this field from a third-party perspective, so it sees an object called a field with a football. But Heidegger says you are not an observer outside the field. You are the field itself. You are the emptiness where the football is allowed to be placed. This might seem like a pedantic argument over metaphors, but it actually has massive philosophical consequences. An observer looking at a field with a football would easily conclude that this field is a football field, and even be smug about this conclusion because they think this is the holistic view. But if you realize your existence is the field, then you understand it could be a football field, or a parking lot, or a farm. It could even just be an empty plot where a random football happened to land. Most people never see these possibilities because their vision is restricted by the football. They fall into the fixed mindset of, I am a football field. This brings us to Heidegger's concept of das Man. Das Man usually translates to they, but it doesn't refer to a specific group of people, nor does it imply a simple me versus them confrontation. To Heidegger, society is like a loosely organized parade. If you look at the individuals, their steps and cheers are perfectly synchronized. Yet, the parade as a whole maintains a clear direction and constant cheering sounds. This trend toward averaging is the state of das Man. Being swept along by the crowd, cheering because everyone else is cheering. To the person next to you, you, as a profoundly confused person just following conventions, become part of the reason they keep moving and cheering. Das Man is the state of existence where the individual dissolves into the collective. This is the exact state of the Glamoth Iron Cavalry. Every soldier is mentally linked to the Empress Titania, essentially in a hive mind. Individuals have no names, only serial numbers. Their entire existence is the identity of the Iron Cavalry. A common misconception is to equal das Man with faceless others. This is similar to the mistake of thinking Dasein is just human existence. While technically true, it brings in subjective bias. When we say faceless others, we think of mindless internet trolls or mediocre people living lives of quiet desperation. If you've read Nietzsche, you might think of his last man. The last man is certainly das Man, but the factors that lead to a Dasein into the state of das Man, as well as the typical look of das Man, vary by culture. Heidegger focused on the evasion of responsibility and the simplification of a complex world, but unlike the last man, the defining trait of das Man is simply dissolving into the collective. The reason, the motive, the culpability are all superfluous. That's why HSR gives us a version of Das Mann that looks nothing like the last man. They are elite pilots in high-tech mecha, fighting glorious battles and sacrificing themselves heroically. Yet, they are Das Mann because each individual is dissolved into the glory and hatred that is not their own. We now know Glamoth wasn't an empire, but a republic. The glory for the emperors and the hatred for the swarm were just a dream, fabricated to give their lives a reason to be consumed by war. There's an interesting detail here. The Iron Cavalry are not natural humans. They are products of genetic engineering. This engineering causes entropy loss syndrome, forcing them to remain inside either their mecha or medical pods.
Entropy loss syndrome. Have you heard of this term? It's a strange condition. Those suffering from it will experience an irreversible chronic dissociation of their physical structure. This means they will slowly fade away, and the process is barely noticeable to others.
I often say that the word of Stario is a philosophical one. The power here comes from real-world ideas. Similarly, physical ailments in HSR are often metaphors for spiritual conditions. Heidegger believed that the reason Dasein falls so easily into Das Mann is closely linked to modern technology. I know this makes Heidegger sound like a grumpy old man shouting, "It was better in my days." But I promise you, it's not like that. You just need to hear his reasoning. Heidegger loved etymology. He traced the word technology back to the Greek word techne, which is a form of revealing. In the ancient world, technology meant revealing the inherent potential of a material. If I go and mine marble to make a table, the techne employed here is to reveal the table that was already the potential within the stone. It is a process of working with nature to let its potential shine. Modern technology is different. It is a process of challenging nature and exploiting its potential. When I go and mine oil, I'm not revealing it. I'm treating it as a resource to be stockpiled and later consumed. In fact, I don't even need the action of mining to see it that way. I look at a basin and see oil reserves. I look at a river and see hydroelectrical power reserves. I look at a forest and see timber reserves. Everything is downgraded from being to what Heidegger calls standing reserve. Heidegger called this essence of modern technology Gestell, usually translated to inframing. It is a process that frames all existence in a rigid container and labels it resource. Some might say, this is great. It's proof of human progress and makes life more and more convenient. Heidegger would agree that our life is more convenient now, but our lives are becoming impoverished and barren. His true fear was that this framework of existence as resource would eventually expand to include human beings. In fact, he thought it was inevitable, and history proved him right. To most of us living in modern societies, the term human resources sounds perfectly normal. But that is exactly what Heidegger warned us about, viewing people as only consumables for the benefit of a system. Interesting fact, do you know when the term human resources gained popularity? As far as I can tell, it was in 1958 when economist E. White Barkey published a report called The Human Resources Function. 4 years after Heidegger raised these concerns in his 1954 work, The Question Concerning Technology. When you look at the Glamoth Iron Cavalry through this lens, you realize they are the ultimate victims of Gestell. They cannot exist as individuals, they would just disappear due to entropy loss. Their entire existence is literally inframed, either in a combat mecha or in a medical pod. Technology empowers them, but it also enslaves them. Within the technological framework, they are alienated from their own Dasein and become tools and resources for the collective. They become Das Mann. By now, you might think Heidegger was a total pessimist. Now that our 21st century society is completely merged with modern technology, are we just beyond saving? Not quite. Heidegger quoted the poet Hölderlin, but where danger is, grows the saving power also. You know how during air travel, the airline seems to always set the cabin temperature to be just the right amount of uncomfortable, enough to make you suffer, but not enough so that you actually do something about it. But if the temperature dropped so low that your teeth were chattering and people were hugging random strangers for warmth, someone would stand up and demand a change. Similarly, Heidegger believed that within this technological framework, where Dasein is flattened into a resource, tension begins to build. This tension manifests as angst. Note that there is a difference between angst and fear. Fear has an object. For example, fear of spiders. Angst has no object, or you could say its object is nothingness. It's fear of nihility itself. Angst arises when Dasein realizes two things: the barrenness of life and the inevitability of death. We've touched on the barrenness of life, now let's talk about death. We all know we are going to die. As I said in my Acheron analysis, we all accept the fact that one day we will die. Yet, we live every day as if we would never die. It's not even something we should bring up in polite conversations. I mean, just try it. Tomorrow when you go to work, tell your co-workers that last night you were lying on bed and you were reflecting on death. And just observe the absolute terror in their eyes as they advise you to go see a shrink. But this lack of reflection on death is precisely what keeps the vast majority of us in the state of Dasman. It doesn't matter if my current life is barren. Tomorrow is infinite. There are countless days and countless ways we can still trailblaze. And it turns out, one tomorrow follows another until death actually arrives and we still haven't embarked on that journey that we keep delegating to the future. That's when we realize we never actually lived. It isn't enough to see the inevitability of death. We must see the imminence of death. Because literally, it could happen any second. The world is full of variables we cannot control and aren't even aware of. Lately, I've been quite fascinated with astrophysics, so let me broadcast something I have learned. We all know that there is a limit of speed in our universe, the speed of light. But that is also the limit for information transfer. So if a catastrophic event happened somewhere in the universe and is heading toward us at the speed of light, we would have no way to find out in advance. The moment we observe it is the moment we are destroyed. Of course, I'm no astrophysicist, so go ahead and Google vacuum decay yourself and listen to what the experts have to say. No amount of technology can save you from that. As Heidegger puts it in his iconic, existential dread-inducing way, as soon as a human being comes to life, he is old enough to die at once. Well, he's quoting a medieval prose, but still. In this sense, Firefly is lucky. Her entropy loss syndrome forced her, as the sole survivor on a scorched earth, to viscerally experience both the barrenness of life and the imminence of death.
The Empire fell, and all restrictions vanished. For the first time, green flames ignited upon my body. And for the first time, I touched the true path power that the Glamoth Knights wield. That's when I realized entropy loss syndrome is a death called living.
Because she felt this angst toward nihility, a powerful tension was born from the depth of her Dasein. This is the embodiment of the Heideggerian concept she quoted during her awakening. Each individual as existence, as Dasein, is a being towards death. To be truly human, to be a Dasein, we must embrace death as an integral part of life. While the English line, "life begets death," isn't strictly wrong, it places the emphasis on causality and natural cycles. Being towards death, however, emphasizes that by our awareness of the end, we can work in reverse and establish the meaning of life. If I had written this analysis before Amphoreus, it might have ended here. But version 3.8 completed Firefly's story, and the new perspective it introduced acts as a conceptual lens, explicitly applying the terms we learned in Amphoreus to bring Firefly's character into much sharper focus. Before the Embers of Glamoth, Firefly lived as Dasman. As a member of the Iron Cavalry, she was reduced to a tool. Heidegger notes that tools have a very interesting existence, fluctuating between two states, ready to hand and present at hand. When we use a tool effectively and effortlessly, we don't even notice it. The tool is transparent, functioning as an extension of ourselves. This is the ready-to-hand state, because it's ready to be wielded by our hand. When we stop the work and look at the tool, examining it for what it is, we experience it as present at hand, because it's, well, present at our hand for us to examine. At that moment, it ceases to be a mere transparent tool and becomes an existence in highlight. This might sound abstract, so let's use an example. Heidegger loved using the example of a hammer, but I prefer a more relatable one. Right now, you probably aren't paying much attention to your individual body parts. But if you were to drop down and do 100 push-ups right now, you'd be forced to feel some of them. Your arms feel weak, your muscles are screaming. When you try to move, you are forced to observe these parts as independent existences because they are shouting at you. We are not well, we are in pain. We are, in a sense, somewhat broken. It is only when a tool breaks or is missing, in either case it fails to function for the system, that it shifts from a transparent ready-to-hand state to the prominent present-at-hand state. You are finally forced to contemplate it as itself. Heidegger calls this contemplation Sorge. Normally it's translated into care, but I think it can be a bit misleading because of its common usage. So let's stick to the German term, Sorge. Now remember, this is an analogy. The tool we are discussing is actually the mistreated and flattened Dasein, ourselves. Dasein, and only Dasein, can feel its own brokenness, and this brokenness is precisely the combination of the barrenness of life and the imminence of death. This brings us back to Amphoreus and the broken crystal flower of Cyrene. As far as I can recall, the discourse on flaws wasn't elaborated in Firefly's 2.x story. It was in version 3.8 that she told us why she chose the name Firefly.
The name I gave myself is Firefly. I used to think I was similar to a firefly, just a fleeting glimmer of light. But later, I realized no one would give themselves an unlucky name. It was also because I thought fireflies were beautiful. Later, someone told me that my eyes don't actually work very well. Otherwise, I would have figured out that those insects aren't beautiful at all. Beauty, love, all our feelings stem from the flaws we were born with. And that's what makes each of us unique.
Heidegger says that Dasman is an averaged way of existing. We usually focus on how this pulls exceptional people down to the level of the crowd, which was Nietzsche's critique on the last man. But Heidegger's brilliance lies in that averaging works both ways. It also levels up those who are below average by erasing their flaws. This doesn't mean we become flawless. It means we live as if those flaws don't exist. Just like our attitude toward death. We aren't supposed to point out flaws in polite conversations. Say you meet someone who only has one leg. Are you gonna get up there and ask, hey, how did you lose the other one? No, you avert your eyes. Don't let them think you are looking at their flaw. You avoid any conversation on morning exercise routines, otherwise they might be reminded they cannot go out for a 5-kilometer jog like you every day. But that flaw of theirs is what makes this person unique. presenting them with a unique set of challenges in life that most people never faced, diminishing but at the same time enriching their life experience that most people would never know if they keep on living in the state of Dasman. And that is just the first step. Accepting flaws means recognizing that our past and future are also flawed. It's a chain reaction. My flawed past shaped my flawed present, which in turn dictates my flawed future.
Perhaps the Dream Master was right. All the past we've left behind has already determined our future. All my experiences so far will still make me choose to step into danger when I face it in the future. But you misunderstood my answer. I guess it's my fault too. Always talking about wanting a normal life, as if the past that shaped me is some heavy burden weighing me down. Being a Glamoth's Iron Cavalry and having entropy loss syndrome are more than just scars. They are a past that taught me to cherish, urged me to seek, and showed me how to love. Indeed, I can't change the outcome or even the process. But I can decide how to view my destiny.
By now, you might have the impression that Heidegger views Dasman as an evil state to be escaped at all costs. You know what, I'm already 1 foot out the door to find a forest where modern technology can't reach and live off the land. But this is where Heidegger differs from Nietzsche. Heidegger believed that we should not fully escape the state of Dasman. It can be done. It's not technically impossible. You could become a hermit, but that is still a form of escape. Just like Dasman is an escape from truly existing as Dasein. If you reject the collective entirely, you deny a fundamental aspect of your own existence, that Dasein is, by nature, also Mitsein, being with others. The key is not to fix the flawed self or change a flawed fate, but to realize that self and fate cannot be flawless. Furthermore, it's precisely because they are flawed that they are mine. We don't overcome Dasman. We find a way not to get lost within it. This is Heidegger's definition of authenticity. So authenticity is how Dasein should relate to itself. But since Dasein is also Mitsein, being with others, then how should it relate to others? The question throughout the Penacony arc is, why does life slumber? You might have made the connection by now that for Heidegger, the state of slumber represents the state of Dasman. Firefly and Sunday begin at the same starting point. They both believe life slumbers because they are afraid of waking up.
Why do people choose to sleep? I think it's because they're afraid to wake up from the dream.
And as for why life slumbers, it is because we are afraid to awaken from our dreams.
However, they see different things within that state of being afraid. Sunday sees the weakness of humanity. To him, this flaw is something that needs to be compensated for. This isn't to diminish Sunday as a character. I believe he is an incredibly noble soul. The Dream Master's fourth addict states, if you love everyone, you love no one. And if you're like me, your mind immediately goes to Cyrene, as it always does, and try to analyze the clash between this addict and everything Cyrene stands for. In my Cyrene video, we explored her love with capital L, the affirmation of existence as a whole. If Cyrene loves everyone, can we say she loves no one? Of course not. Actually, Sunday wouldn't agree either. That is why he rejected this addict and made his own. In my Cyrene video, I mentioned the idea of Miguel de Unamuno that love is born from compassion. Pop quiz, what is the etymology of compassion? If you say com and passion, I'll give you
0 points.
Compassion comes from the Latin word cum, meaning together, and pati, meaning to suffer. so literally suffering together. In this sense, Cyrene and Sunday are the same. Cyrene chose to dive back into the cycles of Amphoreus to suffer with the world. Sunday chose to bear a lucid loneliness outside Anna's dream. When it comes to their resolution, they are standing at the same height, which is why they both wielded emanator level power. So why is Cyrene a main character while Sunday is a final boss? It's simple. Sunday is missing the piece Firefly holds, the flaw. Firefly saw the angst against nihility within that state of being afraid. And through it, she saw a light of hope. Thus, a flaw isn't something to be fixed or to be compensated for. It is Dasein's only path to salvation. Cyrene embraced the flaws, the brokenness of existence, and aligned herself with it by breaking herself. Sunday, however, tried to become the flawless sun.
If I become the only star in the sky, even if I belong to no one, there would still be no cruelty.
As Cyrene's story of Crystal Flower tells us, a truly flawless existence has no hurt and does not understand love. Once you embrace the impurities of the world, you are no longer flawless. The flawless sun is an impossible dream because it's fundamentally incompatible with a flawed world. You might say, this sounds too metaphysical. What specifically should we do? Well, for that, we have to introduce more of Heidegger's terms. Sunday and Firefly represent two different modes of Fürsorge, Einspringen and Vorausspringen. I imagine your reaction to the last sentence is best summarized by this line.
Feel sad. Oh, I don't understand.
It's actually quite simple. Heidegger seems difficult to read because he invented a lot of terms, but he invented them in a way that is as descriptive as possible. Once you get them, they are incredibly vivid. Remember how you did 100 hypothetical push-ups and your arms and muscles are failing you, and you are forced to contemplate them as themselves, which Heidegger calls Sorge? To be more precise, this is one of the two modes of Sorge. It's called Besorge. Besorge is how you relate to tools, be it hammer or your sore muscles. There is another mode called Fürsorge. It is how you relate to people. If you look at people through the lens of Besorge, you are objectifying them. Both Sunday and Firefly operate at the level of Fürsorge. They genuinely care for people as Daseins. But Fürsorge branches into two paths, Einspringen and Vorausspringen. Springen just means to leap or to jump. Ein means into, and Voraus means ahead. Let's say I see someone fall into a river, and I'm worrying about them. I have Fürsorge for them. So I have two options. I can jump in and pull them out myself. I take over their struggle and handle it for them. Alternatively, I can jump ahead of them and show them how to swim to shore. Sunday chose the former. He jumps in to manage everyone's lives, which ultimately strips them of their own autonomy. Firefly chooses the latter. She jumps ahead to lead, showing others the possibility of exercising their own agency.
I admit that you are a born leader. Your perspective on humanity brims with pessimism. Yet you express compassion for all, even when your heart pities them. But unlike you, I live for the self. From my perspective, individuals making choices for themselves is their birthright.
Firefly says she lives for the self. She doesn't just mean she lives for herself. I mean, she does, but she also conducts herself in such a way to preserve the self of others. Sunday's logic is, I have predetermined that you are weak. You cannot afford the luxury of agency, but I can. So I will exercise my agency for you. Firefly's logic is, I have no right to label you as weak. Your agency is as valuable as mine. All I can do is to show you it can be done so you can save yourself. This is why she says everyone has a different answer, and this is why she ignites herself to light up everything around her, so others can see the path under their own feet and walk it themselves.
Everyone has their own answers as to why life slumbers. Moths don't fly to flames because they yearn for light. It's about going through the flames, igniting yourself and burning with the most intense light. My destiny won't fall into darkness. I will light up everything around me.
We see here that Firefly significantly transcends Aventuring's philosophy, representing Heidegger's development on Nietzsche's ideas. This is why Aventuring was presented as antagonistic, while Firefly stands with us. Both experienced angst toward nihility. Aventuring's way of overcoming it was through the gamble. To lose leads to death, which equals nihility. As long as he keeps winning, he keeps nihility at bay. When he finally loses, his existence is over anyway, so it doesn't matter. Firefly's way is self-ignition. To extinguish leads to death, which equals nihility. As long as she is burning, she keeps nihility at bay.
As long as I can keep burning, then wherever I am will be flames, not ashes.
The difference is that a gamble requires an opponent. Nietzsche's path requires a binary opposition. He must keep dismantling something to keep overcoming nothingness. Self-ignition, however, requires nothing but oneself. However, Firefly wasn't the one that defeated Sunday. In relation to Sunday, her philosophy is still confrontational, not transcendental. This is the limitation of Heidegger's philosophy. Against Sunday, Firefly wins in the depth of her understanding of existence, but she loses in coverage of her compassion. She walks her own path, and her light only illuminates those who happen to be nearby. Compared to Sunday standards, her light is still cruel.
The stars are cruel, only because they have never shared their heat with the masses, burning fiercely only for themselves.
Firefly's way of life, much like Heidegger's thoughts, can provide light, but it struggles to provide warmth. When people learn that Heidegger was a Nazi, they usually take one of two stances. Either his philosophy leads inevitably to Nazism and should therefore be discarded, or he simply failed to practice his own philosophy by letting himself be swept away and turned into Dasman. I believe neither is correct. Heidegger's philosophy is ultimately a philosophy of the self, about how an individual thrown into a chaotic existence can reclaim themselves and find their own path. Where that path leads is of no concern to him because that is where his philosophy ends, at the place where Dasein's own path begins. The fact that his path led to Nazism is completely incidental. It's not a proof of error, it's a cautionary tale. By burning yourself, you create light and dispel nihility. But fire is still a powerful, destructive force that needs to be wielded with caution. Firefly is someone who enables the Trailblazer to find the final answer to Penacony, but she doesn't hold it herself. Our true guidance comes from Acheron. She combines the pieces held by Firefly and Sunday, namely the existence of self and the compassion for all, to arrive at the answer long before the Trailblazer ever did.
Why does life slumber? We don't know the answer yet, but we're about to awaken from this dream. Or perhaps such is the answer itself.
She says it in a cryptic way, but it's actually just Trailblazer's final answer. To awaken from this dream is the answer itself. But this isn't a video about Acheron. It's about Firefly. I said this about Aventuring and Nietzsche, and I'll say it again for Firefly and Heidegger. For the vast majority of us, Reaching their level is already an incredible achievement. Before we can talk about how we should exist, we must first actually and fully exist. We may find ourselves existing on a scorched earth, but that's still something we've never had. On this real ground, a new shoot can sprout and bloom, something we can finally be proud to call our authentic self. So that concludes this episode. I hope you enjoyed the video and that it helped you enjoy this wonderful game even more. Until next time.